You're listening to One Family, What's God Doing? Where we explore what God's doing in YWAM locations throughout Virginia. We can't wait for you to find out what God's doing today. Welcome back to What's God Doing, and we are joined once again with Jesse Carmichael. So, Jesse, what's God doing in Richmond, man?
Well, we're raising up a new generation of YWAM missionaries in our DTS, our discipleship training school. This one is focused on children at risk. It's a really important topic for us right now and what we feel like God is trying to say. And I really felt I wanted to lean into this idea, this a YWAM value, one of our core values of championing young people. Because in this season, one of the things that I've had to do, because I just can't do everything, is a lot more delegation and entrusting leadership over things to people and individuals who normally don't carry that leadership, or maybe things that I've held on to for too long that I've had to pass on. And this is a key YWAM value. But I just wanted to talk about maybe some of the challenges and the complications and the strategies to actually champion young people. Because it's easy to say, and it's a lot harder to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, one, I had to laugh in my head because as you were talking about how busy things are, there are people literally trying to call you as we're recording.
Could you hear that?
I could hear the buzzing, which is great. I think it was a perfect, beautiful example. But I think you're right that there are many times where we have this hope of championing youth, hope of doing a certain thing, but we don't think about this underlying piece because oftentimes it's maybe not fun or exciting to think about. So what are you referring to? What are these things that we actually should stop and say, wait a minute, let me press in a little more?
Well, if you're going to work on delegation or raising up someone new to do something that you've been doing, or like, especially in a YWAM community, you have a lot of jobs and activities that have a way they're supposed to be done, and they have a purpose for why they exist. And it's so easy to sometimes just take a young person and say, you're the kitchen manager, you're managing this ministry, you're doing this thing. And sometimes things just crash and burn. And we say, oh, you're just such an irresponsible young person. But a lot of the time, what's actually happening in that situation is that we as leaders, or we as those who delegated that responsibility to them, didn't take the time to establish the systems, the training, or orient them to the policies or the reasons why or the vision for that. And so, yeah, if things run amok, things fall apart if we haven't done that correctly. So I've known this for years. One of my strongest weaknesses, that doesn't make sense. One of my biggest weaknesses has been delegation. I have trouble trusting people with things. And it's not because I don't want to. Sometimes maybe because I don't feel I have the time to thoroughly equip them, thoroughly train them, help them understand everything. You know, sometimes if you're going to train somebody really thoroughly, you're like, well, by the time I trained you really thoroughly, I could have done it myself twice, you know, and there's a certain scale to which the things you have to do, if you're up to a certain level, you can just do them yourself without ever having to equip someone else. But when you hit a certain level of activity, you just can't do it anymore. And you have to start investing in and training young people. And so right now with the discipleship training school running, and we've got community outreaches going to reach children in the neighborhood, and we've got our food pantry, and we've got secondary schools planning for the fall, and we've got summer missions planning. We've got interpretation for our bilingual school that's running. We've got people running slides and translations for the lectures and so many jobs, kitchen management, hospitality, everything going on. Sometimes you just say, look, we have got to raise up a new generation of leaders. And I'm just seeing some real breakthrough right now in young people taking leadership. And it took time maybe to get them to a place where they could do that. But I'm really enjoying seeing that happen. But I just wanted to highlight that you have to have policies. You have to have reasons and methods and ways that you do things because they protect us. You know, there's been times where we put a young person in charge of a certain department and we didn't emphasize the why or the how you're allowed to do things. And things started being run very differently. And we're like, why didn't you do it the way that we always did it before? Well, I just didn't think, I didn't know. And it's our own fault if we haven't oriented them to that. And I always say our policies serve us. We don't serve the policies, but our policies serve us by protecting us, by helping us do things for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something maybe that the younger generation struggle with a little bit, is to accept the way things have been done in the past. And we do want to have a place for innovation. But if you're going to innovate, you at least need to know why the policies and the procedures are there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And in YWAM, you can't just have policies. Nobody wants to serve a big batch of policies. They want to serve a vision.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a reason, and there has to be understanding on how running the kitchen, contributes to the vision that God has, or how being an interpreter contributes to the vision,
Mm-hmm.
how grading homework, how cleaning the floors, contributes. So it's just something I've been reflecting a lot on, is why we say we champion young people, but it's kind of hard.
Mm-hmm.
And why do we struggle with it? Oh, it's because you have to do a lot of work training. You have to have good systems and policies in place. And you can't lose the vision that's going to motivate them and encourage them and allow them to serve.
Yeah. What's hard is systems and policies are things that many people just don't want to think about, don't want to engage, because maybe they seem boring, maybe they seem restrictive. Maybe people assume, like, we don't need that. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. And I think we miss the really beautiful things that are baked into those, that one, they can actually be a way of fleshing out the vision further. It takes the vision from being just this vague idea to something that actually has words around it, that has guidance around it, which then honors the vision even more. But I think the other thing, as you were talking, that I thought about is it's actually a way for us to love God and love others. So with loving God, if we are operating within these systems and policies, then we're going to actually be able to serve in a more meaningful, healthy way, and thus show love to God, rather than getting frustrated, getting bitter, getting caught up in something else. But the love others piece, you're talking about these young folks stepping in, and what often happens in these moments is when they stumble or struggle, the young person gets blamed, right? Because you didn't do a good job, you didn't care enough, you weren't working hard enough, you weren't the right fit. These systems and policies are actually ways for leaders and staff to love these young adults. You're giving the gift of a framework, because let's be honest, when we were younger, we didn't always know the best way to operate, even when we thought we did. Or when we thought we didn't, it could seem like a hopeless endeavor. And these systems and these policies create guides. It's like on a road, you have these lines that basically communicate, hey, if you go beyond this, you're probably going to crash. This will help keep you straight. That's the gift that we're giving. Hey, here are the guidelines. Here are the directional things. Here are the signs that say this is not a good direction to go. So now they're not having the burden of having to figure it out on their own, or making the mistake when they don't figure it out. They've had others go before them to lay the path straight, if you will. And they're still going to make mistakes, but it's not going to be for lack of effort from leaders to prepare the way. And so, you have a bunch of young adults coming in now doing these DTSs. You have folks that are going to eventually be considering serving in Richmond long term. What are the ways that you and your team are praying into preparing yourself to be able to do this better and better?
Yeah, well, one thing is to finding the policies and the systems we already had on the books in the past, and making sure we adhere to those and we stick with it, because they're good and they help us. And you know what? Honestly, no one has made exceptions to the policies probably recently more than me.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I do it, it comes back and bites me in the butt. And so I could share from personal experience the safety that creates in the long run. Maybe momentary pain for lasting health. But also, we need to create, especially as we think towards creating new ministries towards children and things like this, like especially with our Children at Risk Secondary School coming up in the fall, is that we really want people to go through the process. It's a project-based school. If you're going to start something new in YWAM, you have to create a system. And again, you said earlier, that sounds kind of boring. Systems, policies, it sounds boring. It's for our protection, and it's actually systems allow you to multiply. So anybody who wants to start a new ministry, I need to encourage them. How do you go about doing things? How are you going to protect children? How are you going to handle budgets? How are you going to and create systems? Because people say, well, I don't need to do that. I'll just figure it out. As long as that's your procedure, your ministry is only limited to you, and you can't multiply, you can't grow, you can't put somebody else in and duplicate it and multiply it out. So there's going to be just an emphasis on creating the processes and the procedures that you need to have for each ministry. So I'll say this, as a whole for YWAM Richmond, we have policies on the books for almost everything. We just have to look at them and apply them. But it's for the new stuff that we need to be exhorting people to create these and adhering to those. And we have to teach them how to do it. Fortunately, we have some really great people coming in who can help us with creating project plans and things like that. And we're going to make sure that we have good training for young people. So we say we champion young people, and it sounds so contradictory and boring. We champion young people by teaching them to create and adhere to policies and procedures and systems.
Yeah. Well, as we close out, I imagine Scripture has something to say about this. So is there a verse that God's been bringing to your heart that connects this?
Yes, I've been thinking about this for a while. And this verse is so popular, but I'm getting another call. This is from Proverbs 29:18. Where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint. This is in the NIV. But blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction. The ESV says it this way: where there's no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. But blessed is he who keeps the law. Read policies, right? Mm-hmm. New Living Translation. When people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild. But whoever obeys the law is joyful. It's funny, it just associates following God's ways, following the policy, following the law leads to joy. And losing track of the purpose, the vision, the revelation that we receive from before and why we do things creates chaos. Mm-hmm. People run wild. Mm-hmm. And in our organizations, we don't want chaos, we want joy. Yeah. And so we joyfully embrace policies, procedures, vision, and try to keep things on track.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for sharing this because, I mean, it's important for us to stop and press into these things. But I also want to thank you because you are literally sharing as your phone is going off, as schools are happening. And I appreciate that you step in even when things are, plans change. Like my plans change. I got my daughter here who's going to pop up in a second, and we got to be ready to pivot, and policies and systems can help us to do that. So thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you for listening, and not just for listening, but for journeying with us as we together, as one family, explore what it means to know God and make him known. Did you want to pop up?
It's a good pop-up.
It's a good pop-up. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of One Family, What's God Doing? If you'd like to learn more about what God's doing in Virginia, visit us at ywamva.org and join us next week for more stories of God at work.